In today's world of two-way fuckery, where people throw reason and logic out the window because of identity politics and the ease of group thought, it's important to let people hear the types of conversations that go on between industry folks, especially the ones that are devoid of political talking points, and this conversation is a perfect example. In this week's episode, my guest is Kenny Barlow. Kenny, aka Kenny Fresh, is an industry vet with years under his belt at North American Arms and now Dasan USA, an industry manufacturing partner in Duluth, Georgia. Kenny is one of the most easygoing and objective people in the firearms industry. Kenny is a breath of fresh air and embraces his rejection of the industry stereotypes with his endless rotation of flat-brim hats, Adidas shell tops, and sport coats. We touch on subjects such as why everything defaults to politics these days, the danger of the claim that a person's speech is the root cause of tragic events, the inherent issues of silencing bigoted speech, comparing Trump's rhetoric on immigration to the lyrics by Tupac and Marilyn Manson, and a host of other controversial topics. If you want to see how two people can have an objective conversation and grapple with sensitive topics, then this is the show for you. If you like what you've heard today, please hit the subscribe button and follow me on social media for updates on Instagram at Michael_Sodini or at Michael David Sodini on Facebook. Thank you. All right, welcome back to the Mike Sodini podcast. And today I have not only a very good friend in the studio, but I also have one of the most unique people that I've ever met in the industry, as opposed to myself or some of the other, I guess, band of misfits that don't fit the typical mold of a gun guy. Like, you're probably the most second ungunned guy, Kenny Barlow.
I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's true, though. I think that there's a few people that just don't strike me as gun people when you look at them, and you're one of them, you know, and especially when you talk to someone like yourself, you kind of come away from those conversations as this person that puts a lot more thought into everything that, you know, they do or say, or how their belief system, because a lot of people just take people from the gun industry and they make it this cookie cutter, like, this is what you have to be. You have to be this super staunch, you know, right-wing conservative, blah, 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 blah. So.
Sure. And I think that was, one of the things that probably struck me about meeting you is I wasn't born and bred in the gun world, to be honest. I mean, growing up, my parents were right-wing conservatives that were philosophically pro-gun, but we never owned guns. So I never grew up around guns. And it wasn't when I was in my late 20s when I actually got into the industry. So all my personality had been established. So yeah, coming into it. And it was one of these things where you looked around and there's a stereotype. It's very, it's definitely changed in the last 12 years since I've been in, but it was very homogenous. It had sort of one type of person. So it was odd to find other people that stuck out. And so I guess that kind of what was the magnet to our little group.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's let the people know at home who you are, Kenny Barlow, where you work, what your history is, just so they have a little background.
Sure. Kenny Barlow, a.k.a. Ill-Dressed Kenny, a.k.a. Kenny Fresh. Kenny Fresh. No, so I did a decade as the sales and marketing guy at North American Arms, where we made the little 22 revolvers, as you know. And then I made a transition. I now identify as an OEM manufacturer. And so now I work for a company out of Georgia doing firearms parts and accessories and project planning for the industry. So we're a support vendor, so to speak, but we're a little bit multifaceted, where we provide aftermarket parts and accessories and all of that, but also, you know, OEM partner with a lot of the big name manufacturers to do barrels, slides, frames, receivers, and stuff like that for the industry. So that's where I'm at now.
So Dasan is where you're at.
Yeah, Dasan USA. Absolutely.
Okay. So crazy times for us these days after last Saturday's events.
Yeah. And the funny thing, I don't know about you, I'm getting weary and tired of it. And maybe it's having kids or whatever, but man, the emotion of these tragedies is weighing on me, and it sucks because it's like I am a 2A absolutist through and through, to the point of libertarian ANCAP version of it. No ifs, ands, or buts, but it's like, man, at the same time, it kills me inside emotionally to see these tragedies.
Yeah, it's I call it making money off standing on graves sometimes. And even though a lot of people would be pissed off at me for saying that, sometimes it feels like that, right? Because no matter what, in the end, innocent people died. We know it's not the tool. The tool is what committed, the horrible tragedy in terms of by pulling the trigger from the person. Right. But at the same time, there's no getting around it that we're going to be looked at and the finger is going to be pointed back to us because we are the creators and sellers of those tools. Yeah. So we're easy targets to blame in a situation like this. But this time, I feel like this is a little different this time, and I'll tell you why. Because we're so charged up politically, and it's such a Crips and Bloods when it comes to Republicans and Democrats now. There's a new twist on the mass shooter, right? Now we're hearing it's the president's fault. You've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like saying President Clinton caused Oklahoma City.
Right.
Like I would never make that claim. I would never draw that conclusion. But the fact it's such an easy thing to do, like we just draw that conclusion. The president is literally responsible. And obviously, again, I know they're being rhetorical, but they, in their minds, are being literal. He caused this. This is a very literal connection. It's a very real connection. It is not in the ether, so to speak.
Yeah, I've never given a president that much power over my own thoughts ever. Yeah. So it's very confusing to me. And I'll be the first one to tell you, like, this echoes or has a familiar feel to it for me personally. I grew up a hip hop fan. So when I saw people like Ice-T and Tupac's lyrics being used against them for police officers dying, I was the first person to come out of my chair and be like, that's fucking ridiculous. Just because Pac and them were talking about a fictional situation. And it's a little different because like if you look at Cop Killer by Ice-T, he was literally talking about taking out pigs, right?
Yeah.
And I still defended Ice-T there because to me that was just art and expression. And so I kind of feel the same way. And then I know I'm going to catch hell from my friends that, they're just gonna be like, oh, see, I knew you just supported Trump, but I feel it's freedom of speech and I feel it's the same way. It becomes blurry,
Yeah, to me, that's the inverse of giving a president credit for things. Like systems are sort of going whether a president is a one-term or two-term president, and what we like to do is give them credit or assign blame for things that maybe were set in motion prior to or that are happening independent of them. So everybody likes to, President Trump is taking credit for this. And it's like, all right, cool. Well, you blame him for everything else. Why can't he take credit for the good things? But I'm with you. I don't like to give that, especially the executive branch. I don't like to give them that much power because you're right. That is sort of what they're doing is they're saying, listen, this one man that speaks for the entire nation geopolitically, I say that rhetorically. It's not, for those who are like, not my president. Listen, he speaks for the nation. I don't want to give him that much power over my actions, So I'm with you 100%. And something else you touched on to the Ice-T and Cube thing. It is art and it is expression, but it is with good reason. It wasn't just born out of nothing. These lyrics that they were spouting are absolutely art and absolutely expression, shaped by their reality, not even just a worldview, their reality and their worldview. NWA was speaking truth to power in a time where if you are objective, you can go, that was shitty. It was shitty to be a minority in LA in the 90s.
Yeah. And I agree with that because I'm a huge Tupac fan, right? And I felt that was very unfair that he had to go on trial and defend his own lyrics.
Oh yeah.
But if you take Holler If You Hear Me, or if you take Cop Killer by Ice-T or Body Count. I mean, if you're going to be direct about it or exact about it, those could possibly read as a manifesto if they weren't lyrics to a song. Right?
Interesting. Yeah. Is it just the medium? What is it? What is it about what they're saying versus what the guy wrote on 8chan or whatever? What's the distinction? And who makes that decision?
Well, and that's why I think it's a slippery slope when you go after freedom of speech or you say this president's words caused this, because I still believe that human beings think for themselves and make their own decisions for themselves. But then again, you look at Charles Manson, right? He said some things and people believed him and they went out and he murdered a bunch of people. So I guess bad things can happen. But maybe having said that,
the beta helter skelter, man, the race war, right? And then the minute you carve a swastika in your forehead, I think you lose all credibility.
You lose all credibility, but it's something that we have to be careful about, because if we say that he's responsible for murder because he said, whatever the pushback was, that the kid used in the manifesto. I can't remember the exact phrase, send them back or whatever. Yeah. Then we're dangerously opening that up to losing our J. Coles or somebody else who might say something that's profound to try to make change or ignite the thought that makes change. I'm not comfortable with that. But then again, I also like my racists really loud, and I like to know where they're at and I can identify them.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first thing you're describing is what in political science is called the chilling effect. By assigning that much power to one person, you could chill the speech of someone who could speak out or be the next person to speak truth to power, and all of a sudden we've nerfed our ability to share thoughts and ideas and communicate. And I'm with you on the I want my racists, my homophobes, my bigots, I want them, my sexists, I want them loud and in the open so I can identify them easily and say that this is what I do not like. This is what I choose not to associate with. And so I'm with you 100%, because if we chill that speech, we force it underground, we sweep it under the carpet, it festers, and then now we're grasping at straw. I mean, shit, we can't even identify what racism looks like or sounds like anymore, because every other day it's an accusation of this is racist, or what did he mean by that? And I just think that's just mentally exhausting. Like if you think about the history of this country, the wars that our grandfathers and our great grandfathers fought, the civil rights that have been earned for women and for people of color in the last 30 or 40 or 50 years, we didn't do all that just so that we could come home and get angry about something else we saw on Twitter every 5 minutes. That's racist. That's sexist. That's violent speech that incites violence. That's white supremacist. This guy is against me. That lady is against her. That is a waste of time. I don't have the energy to dedicate to it. And so I don't see that as much of an existence either. But the interesting thing about that is that you read you read the statistics, and the opinions that are necessarily being shared on social media, Twitter specifically, are outside the mainstream. The New York Times did a whole thing about how you may think that you're in your worldview is the most prominent one, but it only accounts for like 20 or 30% of the mainstream people when you broaden your sample size. But I digress.
That makes sense, though. We talked about like wanting your racists to be loud and out in the open, and I completely agree with that. And I also want my assholes to be out, like people I just don't like, because I don't want to buy them beers and shit like that. Which I
want it when they're like, "Man, you got a tab open?" I'm gonna say no,
right?
No, I don't. I just closed it because you're an asshole.
Yeah, and you talk shit behind my back, so I don't want to be buying people beers that talk shit behind my back. But
I was like, "Oh, hey, Mike, you need a drink? What are you drinking? I got a tab open."
Exactly. But so I actually had a time where I was, for people in the industry that are listening to this, you might recognize the name Lipsy's, which is a big distributor out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And every year the Lipsy's invite me to go down to a football game because they're big LSU boosters and everything like that. So
go Fighting Penguins. I'm sorry. I don't sports, as you can tell by this physique. What LSU, they're Tigers, right? LSU Tigers.
The Tigers.
All right.
Yeah, but so I was walking through, and if anyone knows the Lipsy's, they know that they're very proud of their Jewish faith and everything like that. And we're walking through, and I was walking with Mark Aronson, and he is the husband of Lori. So we're walking through LSU's parking lot, the LSU Stadium parking lot, and there's all this tailgating going on. And then Mark Aronson, Lori's husband kind of nudges me and he says, "See that guy right there?" And I said, "Yeah, the guy that's standing there up on the like box and talking with the couple security guards around him and stuff like that." Couple. I said couple because there wasn't that many. And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Who's that?" And he goes, "That's David Duke."
Oh my God.
And I was fucking blown away by that because David Duke is like this mythical KKK. Like, I would never guess that guy goes in public, right? Like, to me, he's like Sasquatch. Like, he may have some people that he sends out to do his dirty work, but I didn't realize, because I'm from Jersey, and if David Duke decides to show up to a New York Giants game spitting that anti-Semite, rhetoric, he's gonna die.
Exactly. Yeah. Just him being there alone, let alone on a soapbox,
right?
Being like, these people and these people are awful. Yeah. No, you're not long for this world.
Yeah. So it's like, for me, I was blown away. I was blown away that this man, and this is the utopian world I guess I wish I lived in, is able to walk the earth. But then again, that goes against what I'm saying. I want my racist loud and proud, but at times you look at it and you're just like, you're disappointed. It's like, how is that guy able to show his face?
I would never advocate. And again, I'm also a 1A absolutist. I would never advocate for, because to me, it's basically, okay, if you don't like someone's speech or you don't like someone owning guns, then what are your options? Well, you can take their property, their liberty, or their life. That's it. Those are the three solutions. You fine them, you imprison them, and if they resist all the way up to that, then the government can take their life. So I don't see enacting violence against people based on what they say or what products they own and choose to peacefully use as an effective use of our society. So yeah, you get disappointed where it's like, man, how have they not been publicly shamed out of existence? I'm all for that. I mean, I'm all for being able to say, to fight bad speech with good speech. This idea I disagree with. So I'm assuming, and I feel like we're winning that war. I feel like the rational people are winning the war. Or it's like I said when I was talking about the shootings, it's like maybe they're just tired of fighting. I'm just so worn out at this point. I don't want to have the argument anymore. I know where I stand. I know I'm a good person. I just don't give a shit anymore. Which also leads to a problem too. That complacency is, if you're not fighting the good fight, then the other side wins, right?
Yeah, I feel like the good fight sometimes is left better for the people that live it like 24/7. So it's like, I got a text today from somebody that was asking me about some of Pincus's, Rob Pincus's deal with fighting the NRA. And my response was, I pay attention to it only from what he shares with me or what I see on posts. I don't get involved because he fights it a lot better than I do. And he usually just tells me, hey, this is this or this is that. But I'm dealing with Walk the Talk America, where I'm dealing with avidity. I don't like it to distract from the things that, I'm trying to accomplish. It's kind of like how I don't write personal cards to my wife because the people at Hallmark write things so much better than I do. So it's pointless for me I'll just sign it because that's what I endorse. Yeah. I endorse that message.
I endorse that message. I don't have to be the author of it.
What makes you think I'm going to write better than them? They just talked about sunsets and they compared it to love. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, for me, I think it's twofold. You'll make yourself nuts if you keep like trying to defend certain things. Like, I'll give you an example too. I went on one of my favorite shows 2 nights ago. These 2 guys have a show called Pod Therapy, and it's out of this studio in Las Vegas. And I was turned on to it by a Walk the Talk America supporter. He said, you should get on these guys' show and tell them about what you're doing. So I had emailed them months ago, and they didn't respond. And then through some mutual people that I ended up working with who knew them, they said, hey, we'll have you on sometime in August. After the tragedies on Saturday, I end up shooting them a message saying, hey, I know you said you wanted me down in August. My August is getting full. You want to have me on. And of course they got back right away. And then they said, hey, could you come in Tuesday? Because in light of the tragedies, we want to get you on. Well, I went on and I felt I thought they were going to do a little bit of research about me. So I felt like I was going to walk in there and everyone was going to get along, because Walk to Talk America is all about things that we could do together to help mitigate trauma and all the trauma caused by tragedy, and bring suicide numbers down. It's all positive things. Well, they were still emotionally charged from Saturday.
Ah, okay.
And even though they are both, or actually one of the hosts was definitely a gun owner, because he told me, but that made him, that's how he equalized himself with me.
Gotcha.
He was like, I own a gun. So like, it kind of like, for the listener who has no idea, he just became an expert like me, right? Like,
yeah, he's like, oh, well, he's a gun owner, and look at it. It's like those guys. You'll hear people call up radio shows when they're talking about it, be like, I spent 20 years in the military and I own guns, but man, these universal background checks is something I can get behind. And it's like, see, what you did is you tried to qualify yourself to make you that expert. And be like, listen, I'm a guy who owns guns and I'm for these things. So that's what makes me normal.
Yeah. And that's the worst. I can't stand that, because we got into sort of this debate about the AR-15. The one guy was actually pretty cool. He was kind of just neutral, although he did make a comment saying, we don't make rocket launchers legal, do we? And I was kind of like,
yeah, if your brain can't draw a distinction between those things.
But the other guy, basically, he had it out for AR-15s. And I kept telling him, what the issue is and why we can't continue to keep going in this circle about it, because of how it applies to the semi-automatic argument. And he was convinced that the handgun is not as deadly as the AR. And I kept saying, I don't understand. Both will kill you if you're shot with them. It's not my place to argue that. It's just factual. And I brought up Virginia Tech, but then I found myself going down the same old rabbit hole.
And you're back to the talking points.
Yeah. And that's not really, it took away from what I'm doing with Walk to Talk America, but I could tell he was looking for confirmation bias. He wasn't there, and that's what I get for going on to, I guess, a show like that when people are charged up and emotional.
Right.
Because I felt like saying, hey, man, I'm on your side. It's not mental health that is causing, what that caused Saturday. Let me show you what some gun people are doing about that and trying to get rid of the stigma. And then he's sitting there, trying to make a case. And he kept saying, I don't want to bring my personal opinions into this, but it was clear that that's exactly what he was doing by saying that.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the handgun, you're absolutely right. So there is no difference in the lethality of a handgun or an AR-15, because they will both kill you when you're shot with them. Right. But then also the stats don't lie either. Being and having to be that guy. I saw an interesting one a buddy sent to me the other day. If you look at the FBI statistics, rifles kill way less people than handguns every year over year. You raise an interesting point. Is that's what, when you said that's what you get for going on when everybody's still kind of hyped up, but and not to sound like the anti-gun side, but it's like maybe, the right is always like, well, let's wait till all the facts are in and let's wait until we've cooled off. We can have a level-headed debate. And they're like, no, let's talk about this now. And it's like, well, no time like the present, I guess.
Well, but that's, then again, though, you open yourself up to walking into a buzzsaw when it's like that.
Sure. Well, and your intention wasn't to go in there and talk about guns and like that wasn't your like you always say, Walk the Talk is always, it's apolitical. It has nothing to do with policy. It has everything to do with awareness, activism in terms of outreach and programs like that. And the destigmatization of mental health care. So it's funny that they would bring you in and be like, well, why do we have to have AR-15s? And it's like, cool, I'm not the expert on that. Do I look like Rob Pincus or Colion Noir? Like, you want, Yeah, and I'm not even going to make that argument, because I'm the gun guy, right? Like, yeah, so it's like, look, that's not what I'm going to do. And I just want to make it clear for anybody that is listening that I still will continue to listen to that show on a weekly basis. It's still my favorite show. I'm not going to just sit there and be like, oh, I didn't feel good about how they were talking about the AR. And that just goes back to what I always try to say. We could disagree on shit and still be friends. Yeah.
That goes for presidents, firearm types, whatever, colors,
It is funny you made that. You said that. I just to give my brain a break today at work, I was watching some YouTube videos, just going through my subscription of like Joe Rogan stuff or whatever. And I've been watching a bunch of, so they started putting the Dick Cavett show clips like from the 60s and 70s back on, and they've been putting them on YouTube, and they've cleaned them up, and they're all archives or whatever. And this clip came up. The video title is Kirk Douglas and John Wayne Don't See Eye to Eye. And I was like, well, shit, I'll watch this. Okay. And they start talking. It's Kirk Douglas is on Dick Cavett in like the late 60s, early 70s. And they're talking about John Wayne just gave an interview in Playboy, and he voiced some political opinions that he didn't, that Dick Cavett didn't agree with. And Kirk Douglas was like, I've worked with John Wayne on 5 or 6 films. He calls them pictures. So I love that, like old timey Hollywood guys call the movies pictures. I've worked on this picture with him, and he's like, John and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. He's like, but I'll be damned if he is not the hardest working actor in our business. He's like, he's the first one on set. His work ethic is amazing. He treats the cast and crew with the utmost respect. And I'm sitting there going, where did we go? When he's like, we maybe have dinner once every time we shoot a picture, but and we don't talk politics. He's like, because we don't agree. What happened to that? We don't see eye to eye, but I can still respect this man's work ethic as an entertainer and whatever. Apparently now we've moved beyond that.
It's disappointing. I don't know how many. So as a libertarian and a person who I'm an observational lifeist,
sure.
if that's an expression. I look at every situation individually, right? That's how I came to the Tupac thing from what Trump was saying, because it was about thought process and saying like, where have I seen this before, where someone got accused and I was like, shit, that's right. Ice-T and Pac were put on trial because a cop died, I think in Texas, and they brought him in to say that his song, Holler If You Hear Me, inspired the killer to kill the cop, right? So that was the first time that I'd been introduced as a human. Like I was like, that's bullshit. But I get that through life a lot. So the interesting thing is, because I challenge my friends, or I have so many different types of friends from all walks of life. All my liberal friends think I'm a Trump lover and right-wing conservative. All my conservative friends, a lot of them believe that I'm a liberal.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because all I do is challenge, because I hate the echo chamber that I'm caught in, and I'm just like, you're fucking stupid, right? Like if it's good for one person, it's good for the other, right? So I try to take these individual things and dissect them, and how they interpret what I'm saying is, oh, see, once again, you're just a Republican who defends Trump. Or see, once again, there's liberal, the ungunned guy, Mike. We knew you'd be a liberal. You know what I mean? So I can't win.
No, not at all. I fall into the same category. It's like, no matter who I'm talking to, whether it's some of my progressive friends or some of my super conservative friends, it's like, stop making me defend the person you have a problem with right now. Please stop. Yeah, because you're right. You and I have the benefit of objectivity, and so we can look at the 10,000 foot view and go, listen, in a large enough sample, yeah, sure. In this micro view, yeah, this guy's an asshole, but in a big enough sample size, you're all assholes. It's like, so stop making me defend the asshole you're upset about right now. And then have you noticed this started happening? I would say this started happening probably about the time Trump got elected. But man, having to qualify statements because of the audience you're with, where it's like, I didn't vote for the guy, but I did appreciate the other day when X, Y, and Z. And like, once again, I mean, sure, he's a racist, sexist pig, but you know what? I certainly appreciated his thoughts on Syria, or something like that. Like right. the qualification that you have to make before you say anything flattering about anybody, even, or like when I'm talking to my mom, because they're super right wing, and it's like, I'm not saying I voted for Hillary, Mom, but I do like what Tulsi Gabbard has to say. Out of these 20 crazy people, or sorry, you know what I mean. It's something I'm still working on. Out of these 20 people, these 20 idiots that are running for president right now, I think she's the least idiotic one, right? Like, you have to say it like that.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you're talking to. You have to qualify your statements. And that's frustrating.
Dude, don't worry about the crazy thing. I do it all the time. I think when it's in the form of somebody being hurt.
Yeah,
I think that's when it.
I got you that. But I will say this. Like, I've told you this before, is that from the moment you started the getting into on the mental health side of things, and I started seeing all the stuff you're posting and all the conversations we've had, I appreciated being more aware of my language, my choices. And you're right. I appreciate I appreciate right then it's in the application of it.
Right.
Because, you can be like, that's not what I mean. And you can objectively go, that is not what I mean. What I'm not doing is trying to stigmatize. I would much rather call those people crazy. You know what I mean? In fact, it is more appropriate to call the 20 Democratic candidates and all the politicians in general insane. I would much rather call them that than anybody who is struggling with mental health.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't know. I want to go back to what you were saying, but when I was on the Pod Therapy show the other day, Dr. Jobin, or whatever his name is, Jim, he actually made a statement. He kept saying the word commit suicide. And that was one of the big things that Mental Health America was kind of pushing me towards, is stop saying the word commit, because nobody committed anything. But I was kind of shocked. It didn't bother me. But it was just like, for me now, like you said, I'm starting to react to ways where I'm like, ooh, don't say that. But I'm like, he's a mental health professional. Right. How does he not know that?
Well, and that's interesting too.
Yes.
I think you had mentioned the commit suicide thing to me before, or I'd seen a post about it. And I never thought about the use of that term, because the use is always say, like, for example, he committed an act of X, or he committed a crime, he or she committed a crime, or committed so it makes, felony. Oh, he committed a felony. So he committed suicide.
He committed stupidity when he got married. Yeah. I mean, see, there's so many different commits that are bad.
And then the
way, it's my hacky joke for the day.
I'm gonna try and squeeze one in. Let's see. I'm biding my time, but I'll find it. But yeah, I never thought about that use of that as the operative word of what are they doing, and what is the term? What do they say? Take a life? Is that what is the preferred? What is Mental Health America like?
Well, you would say take your own life. You could say, So now I'm drawing blanks. I always say take their own life, or he took his life. Like that's the safest one for me. The other one is, and it's hard to say this one for me, because it's just like words I don't put together, but he acted on suicide, or things like that. You see what I mean? Like they just leave the commit out. So took his own life, or killed himself by suicide, or died by suicide.
Oh, okay.
See, now they're starting to come back to me. There's one other one that people use, and it's still very clunky for me, but that's all with practice, right? Like, you start to learn. I'm very good at I was able to get that thrown out. I never say commit anymore, but in the beginning, I was saying it a lot, and I couldn't help myself. But then every time I was on an interview and I would say it like that, I would literally be like,
right, just kicking yourself.
But nobody else noticed. Like 90% of the people probably didn't notice, but then all of a sudden I was just like, I'm like,
well, and we're always our own worst critics. But and I guess the thing that you can just constantly remind yourself of is, it's like, okay, I may have not used the most appropriate term, but at the same time, who else is talking about mental health awareness? So I think the benefit outweighs the, again, we're our own worst critics. You at least, you were aware of it, and the next time that'll be one less time you do it. You know what I mean? So that's that. Yeah. But
for sure. One of the things I wanted to ask you, we could have easily got on here and kind of rapped about what firearms or try to educate people that might be listening. But for the most part, we know that there's going to be a lot of gun people on here that are going to listen to it.
And they're going to think our opinions are shit anyway.
They're going to think our opinions.
That guy doesn't know what he's taught. Oh, he likes that. He carries that. What a piece of shit. He carries a Glock. I only carry a 1911. Oh, he carries a 1911.
That's right.
He loves 1911s. Polymer or die.
Yeah, Pincus is a huge 1911 guy. Oh, I just exposed him from the 1911 closet.
Oh no!
Oh, no. Listen, should we just start rumors about people? We just
outed Pincus as a 1911 guy. Uh-oh.
No, but so one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, how often do you? And I get this a lot. I get articles sent to me by my friends that play identity politics every day. And this morning it was great because I got one from my mom who's about as far left as you could go. And then I got the same article going against what my mom sent me. It's not like these two people knew each other. It was kind of about medication and its role in mass shootings.
Interesting.
And it was two opposite articles sent from two opposite people on two different sides. I always laugh at that because I think both people who sent it to me meant well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I do. And the other thing is I love the dumpster fire that is Twitter. And so I use that as the exact same thing. It's like every other tweet is just someone refuting someone that, some opinion that the last person said. So as of late, I've been seeing that a lot too. Just people putting that out there, like, here's this. Here's all these stats about the types of guns and why does anybody need this, and why should this exist? And then on the other side, it's like, look at these motives and these mental health issues. And it's funny too. I do get that a lot, but it's weird. It's weird too. What I'm noticing, and I think I texted you this the other day. I'm noticing that the sources. I feel like the dialogue, on the gun side of things, I feel like the dialogue is shifting when it comes to these shootings, just ever so slightly. And I think that's a good thing. But I also think the reason for it is stupid. I think that in the age of Trump, all of a sudden people that are anti-Trump are concerned about motives, right? And there has been considerable amounts of arguments about guns. However, been a lot more about hate speech, or how does people get radicalized, the uses of the terms domestic violence or homegrown violent extremism. And again, I think it's because Trump's president, so they're really concerned. They wouldn't be concerned about it if it were other things, which is the hypocrisy of the whole situation. But I'm actually glad that the rhetoric is shifting ever so often, because like you saw. I sent you the LA Times article, I think is what I did. I sent you that LA Times article where they were like, we documented, or we poured through every mass shooting since 1960 something. And they all shared 4 things in common. And the whole article had nothing to do with the types of firearms. It was more, as it related to guns, it was the ease of access to them. But the 4 commonalities, I would argue that 2 of them had to do with mental health care. Traumatic events. They're like, all of them shared something like a traumatic event and then something else. But that was from the LA Times, and then CNN posted a piece the other day that said it literally, the headline was universal background checks wouldn't have stopped these shootings. I was like, oh, so we're actually talking about the stats now, huh?
Right, the logic.
Yeah, we're actually talking about things that matter. And we were like Neil deGrasse Tyson catching shade for that tweet about statistics. And then I saw Ricky Gervais tweeted something the other day where he's like, it literally said, or something about emotions not being more important than facts. And I was like, what world are we living in where these are that to me, those are the normal thought processes. Where have these thought processes been? But yeah, I think that I'm glad that I feel like the conversation is shifting, if not ever so slightly, to the right conversations, if for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I think it's important that we get back to facts. And I know that, Neil's tweet I say that like he's my buddy.
No one would have believed if he wasn't.
No, but his tweet may have been, for many, the timing may have been a little insensitive. Just, and I get that. I understand why people would feel that way. But if you look at it, it's science and it's fact and it's everything. It's everything that's like correct, right? Like those numbers were real, and that's the one you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep. The 500 medical accidents or whatever.
Yep. And it goes back to one of the greatest slides I saw when I was sitting through a Mental Health America presentation, and it flashed up the October 1 shooting, right, in Vegas, which obviously, really hit home for me because it's my hometown now, and I had friends that were there. So I got to hear stories and things like that. But so I see that on the screen, and it says 59 people were killed in the October 1 massacre of Las Vegas. 58 people died by firearms. They suicide by firearms 58 times a day. So there's an October 1 every single day that the rest of the country doesn't know about because CNN and Fox that's not going to sell ad space.
No,
there's no salacious story there.
You're absolutely right. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's my sticking point. I think you're right that while NDGT's tweet was maybe
I love that.
Its timing was a little tone deaf and the stats weren't wrong. And this maybe, and as I'm seeing I wouldn't have been this guy 5 years ago. I'd have just been like, yep, he's right. I don't care about the timing of it. But I think now that we're actually talking about and the dialogue is pivoting, I'm more inclined to be like, that is a little insensitive. But I think to your point, the thing about when it comes to a mass casualty incident, we don't think about the 58 lives taken by themselves every day because it's not a mass casualty. It's not a localized and concentrated mass casualty incident. When Neil deGrasse Tyson makes that tweet of 500 medical accidents in a 48-hour period, or your point of there's an October 1 every day when it comes to suicide, they don't resonate because they're not a concentrated mass casualty event, right? It's not one doctor killing 500 patients in a 48-hour period at one hospital, right? That sample size is 350 million, whereas it's one person taking out 24 people in one town, in one community, and did it because of a race or a skin color or sexual orientation. Both sides are right. And I don't know what the appropriate time is to be like, this is more right now because of the nature of it. But yeah, we should also be talking about these other things, like the fact that there are 58 suicides a day.
Yeah, I think it's a combination in my utopian world. I always go back to like how I grew up watching Star Trek and everybody was on the same deck and they all got along and they all loved each other.
Trying to get everybody on this deck.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There it is.
You got it. You crowbarred it in. You worked dirty on that one too.
I went blue.
No, but in the perfect world for me, I guess I would love the mental health suicide prevention commercial to be crowbarred in as much as the Sarah McLachlan dog commercial is on all these cable channels. Maybe that would just be a little bit of an equalizer to understand that there is an issue out there, because this Dayton and El Paso, and by no means am I trying to say, there's a comparison, or maybe there is, I don't know, there's probably people that have been affected by suicide that says that was my own personal Dayton or my own personal El Paso, motherfucker.
Yeah.
But my thing is it's all trauma, it's all crisis, it's all emotion. And that's what happens with suicide. It's like a bomb goes off, and the people that are the most affected are the ones that aren't there anymore, are the ones that are still there, right? The other person's gone, or the person, and then it's the kids, it's the brother, it's the sister, it's all the friends. They're the ones that have the emotional problem, and they carry that crisis with them, which could lead to the drinking problem, the drug abuse, the mental health, decline in mental health. There's so many things. All these things are trauma bombs, crisis bombs. It's like all of them are,
right.
And it's a tough thing to do to try to bring people back into the center. But in between I saw this video in between all these shootings, these cable outlets look for things to talk about, and a lot of them are opinion based. In between shootings, I'm out there trying to mitigate trauma and suicide.
Right.
I don't get to just sit and do an opinion, right? Walk to Talk America is about trying to solve and bring down numbers that cause crisis and trauma. So it's important to me for the tweets to be out there so people can put things in perspective, because I think it helps you get over it. Mm-hmm. When I tell people that statistic, or that stat about 58 people a day die by suicide from firearm, mm-hmm. they're usually like blown away, because it frames it up for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It did it for me. So,
but that's the funny thing. Like when we talk about the statistic of, and I'm gonna have to figure out a transition for this, but that's the funny thing when we talk about police shootings. I always remind people, or I try to remind people, that it's, and again, it's sort of a concentrated, localized event in very much the same way as what we were talking about with the mass shootings, is that depending on where it's at, so it happens in, if it's Eric Garner in New York, or
Trayvon
Martin, and you have to look at it kind of on a population level situation, because when I was in my master's degree, and I was living in Utah, my master's thesis was on implementation of police body cameras. And I was looking at the shooting statistics in Salt Lake City, Salt Lake police officers, and basically it boiled down to this: Salt Lake police was killing 2 people a month in Utah. And that's a state that has wildly less of a population, sparsely spread out. And so 2 people a month's a lot for Salt Lake. For cops to be killing, like cops are killing 2 people a month, Salt Lake PD alone. But the majority of the time they were shooting white people. And so on a microcosm scale, it looks like an epidemic of systemic racism, which I am not disagreeing that does exist. But I think when you pull out the sample size, I think that the indicator, or the characteristic that all of them have in common is less about race and more about poverty. It seems to be because policing, when you've got quotas, when you've got to make a city seem safe, you go to where the concentrations of crime are, and they tend to be in poorer communities. There's not a lot of poor communities of, like Utah is super homogenous. It's very white. It's growing in terms of minority populations, but it's mostly Hispanic. But the police go into where the crimes are, and it's mostly in poor white neighborhoods. And so I think on a long enough timeline, we'll get to the point where it's really an economic issue and not a race issue, 100%.
Well, I think that though goes to police officers as well when it comes to there's 2 things that I was always blown away by was their lack of training mm-hmm. With a firearm. A lot of people think that police officers get all the best training and everything like that. And if you ever have a friend who's a cop, especially in bigger cities too, that was what blew me away. But I remember talking to a cop from Boston, and I was asking him how many times he gets to the range and he trains with his firearm, and he said once a year when I qualify. Like, that was his answer. He's like, I don't have money to go train. I got a family. I got kids that are going to be going to college soon. So kind of blew me away. And then the other thing that blew me away was we put on our officers this strange ability that they're able to recognize people that battle with mental illness or are suffering in some sort of sense. Like, they're supposed to know, as if they're able to say, like, okay, that person has bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and that's why they're acting bizarre. And we don't even train them on behavioral sciences or patterns, right? Like, we don't, there's nothing for police officers there. And I learned that by observing officer involved shooting classes. And my first, comment after I witnessed one was, they don't teach this to you in the academy. And they're like, nope. And I'm like, oh my God, like, we're not even preparing police officers for what they're running into. Mm-hmm. So they got to take into account all kinds of things. whether that person's hocked up on some kind of drug, whether that person battles a mental illness, whether it could be a combination of both at that time. And then on top of all the other things is, am I walking up on crime? You know, and granted, yeah, there are racist cops out there. But for the most part, I think the problem is that we give them superhero powers that they don't have. You know, we expect them to uphold those powers that they don't have. Yeah, and that's what the shame of it is. Because I think there are a lot of good cops that started off with the right thing, and their heart was in the right place, and they eventually went to a place where it was dark, or, you know, they're just not trained. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. A buddy of mine was coming back on a plane from Florida. He left out of Atlanta, and he had a AR-15 bolt carrier group in his backpack, and somehow it managed to get through Atlanta TSA. But when he was coming back from Florida, the Florida guys caught it, and they pull it out, and they're like, "Sir, is this a pistol slide?" He's like, "Actually, it's a bolt carrier group for a rifle." And he's like, they reached over into their microphone, like, confirmed it's a pistol slide. The TSA then called local PD. Local PD came in. They're like, "Sir, why do you have this slide in your backpack?" And he's like, "You guys are." He was less concerned about the TSA, he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna miss my flight, but you guys don't actually know what this part is in your gun,
right,
that you have in a car that you can use to take a person's life. Like, you don't even know what the part is called." So yeah, the lack of training is mind-boggling.
It's funny. I almost pulled my entire life. I have never gone through TSA with anything that I shouldn't have, and I almost pulled that off the other day with a taser.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in LA and I had a taser. I always have a taser in my car because it's just something that if I can't bring a weapon somewhere, or, you know, you stay in a hotel room and you don't have a weapon on you because your daughter might be staying in there or something like that. Sure. And, you know, whatever be the reason, I have a taser. And I took the taser because the hotel we were staying at in California had valet, and you could only valet. So I took the taser out and I stuffed it in this duffel bag that I have. And I was traveling to Reno 2 weeks ago, and for some reason inside the car, I reached to find something at the bottom of the bag and then I found the taser, and I was like, I was just about to be that guy that's, you know, stuck it in his carry-on and went through security, but it didn't happen. So now
a photo of your taser ends up on the TSA Instagram page. They love,
and they just said, "Sir, there's a taser," and I would have been at first I would have been like, "That's impossible. There's nothing in there," you know. Then I'm going through all these things in my head, and then I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm an idiot."
And I guarantee 9 times out of 10, that's how it happens. "I don't know why you're stopping me. There's nothing you're gonna." Oh shit.
Exactly.
Yep. And like I said, they're gonna post that shit on their Instagram because they love posting pictures of what they found. One time, I think it was one of the guys at Davidson's sent me a screenshot of an Instagram, and like it was like a collage from the TSA Instagram, but it was like a collage of different dangerous items. And smack dab right in the center square was an NAA mini revolver. And I was like, yeah, all right.
Those little guns are so small, though. I mean, you sent me one a long time ago, and I remember showing it to my friends, and we were sticking it in his pocket. And he's like, "Dude, you could carry this in your shirt pocket."
People do.
That's a little bit, yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I could see someone definitely, you know how I could see someone putting that through TSA is if they threw it in some cargo pants and they completely forgot it was there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not like your everyday carry gun. You know, well, I guess it could be an everyday carry gun, but it's not something that I could see how people could easily forget that they threw it in their pants, because that definitely is very concealable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, from building on the conversation that we were talking about earlier, one thing we didn't touch on was the Dayton shooter was a leftist.
Yeah.
And the guy in El Paso was super right.
I think that's another thing that we're starting to see. Like I was saying about the conversation shift is, I think both sides are going to have to come to grips and come to terms with both sides being objectively understanding of the fact that they are guilty of being hypocrites. You know, that it doesn't matter what side you're on. Hate is hate. You know, it's kind of funny because you see some of these things, like they always want to posit this kind of like hateful rhetoric, and all this domestic extremism is usually a characteristic of the right. But you know, a perfect example, I sent you that link to the story about Rand Paul having that surgery over the weekend, and he had a piece of lung removed from that attack from his neighbor forever ago, and he posted on Twitter with something like, you know, had to have this surgery to have a part of my lung removed from, you know, the attack, and I'll be back in full swing when the session reconvenes. And the hateful rhetoric back at him because he is too libertarian or not libertarian enough, or is anti-abortion, or is like too conservative or whatever. Up to the point where I think it was Tom Arnold basically was making replied to him. He's like, well, you got what you deserved when your neighbor attacked you. You immediately lose all credibility to criticize President Trump for his quote unquote hateful rhetoric, when then you just turn around and be like, no, it's only moral when the violence is against people I don't like. You know, or people that disagree.
Tom Arnold is the worst, by the way.
Yeah, he is absolutely the worst. But it's this reoccurring theme. Anything bad that happens is a direct result of the people I hate. That's the rhetoric. That is, congratulations. This is exactly it. If there anything negative that has happened is a direct result of the people I do not like, politically, morally, whatever. There's no gray area there. It's fascinating to me.
What I don't like about people that do that, and I used to fight all the time with my super right-wing friends when Obama was president, I hate when they can't say something good about somebody, because that it kind of weakens your argument with me. So like, I can think of 5 things that I liked that Obama did. I could think of some great things that, you know, before him that Bush did. I could think of some great things that Clinton did, right? I can actually say good things about every president, because I look at presidents as, I feel better when things are just going right or people feel good. That's how I judge a president, right? Because the state level is more where you have to pay attention if you're going to be really political.
Oh yeah,
I think that's way more important. But you know, for me, when you can't, like, I have people in my life that I can say one good thing that Trump has done, and they can't even think of one. And it's really odd to me that you can't think of one good thing that a president has done. And it doesn't have to be about a race. It doesn't have to be about anything. It could just be something that they did that was positive, that helped somebody. You know, so I look at, you know, things that everyone should know that he's done. He's done some great job with prison reform. You know, he did some great job for the great stuff for the music industry as well, as far as getting artists who have been ripped off for years paid. I mean, there's just certain things that you can't argue that that's not a good thing. And it's so funny because there's so many things you can go after him if you hate him for. But there's just, you know, it gets to the point where you listen to someone's argument and you're like, all right, you clearly, this person could cure cancer. And you're not going to like that person.
Absolutely.
No matter what they do.
You're not wrong at all. You know, and I saw that being manifested with the Democratic debates too. It was really funny that you will see people take a position that is in direct contradiction to President Trump's position, specifically because it is President Trump's position and nothing more. Kamala Harris is a perfect example of this. Tulsi Gabbard goes after her on her record, lambaste her about her record as a prosecutor and how she's done more as a prosecutor to harm the poor and the minority communities than help them. She squandered her opportunities, you know, like putting young black men in jail for marijuana and then going on radio shows and laughing about smoking. It's like, that's a little, whatever, or fighting against, allowing exonerating evidence to be presented on death row cases in appeal. It's like, you did that. Like, you can't hide from that. But it's amazing because she's positioning herself as the law and order candidate as well. Trump's the law and order candidate. So it's like, oh my gosh, you're doing the exact same thing, only you're taking a position in direct contradiction to Trump now, because he can, when you're on that debate stage, he is going to come at you from the left side on prison reform. He will come at you and go, I've worked with people to get minor drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenders released from prison while you spent time locking them up.
Yeah, well, and that was one of the funny things, I guess the disappointing things for me and some of my friends, because where I'm in Vegas, the majority of my friends are very liberal. And when he won, which was a shocker, I mean, everybody that I was around was in shock. But when he won, they were acting like, everybody's dog died. And I remember saying, don't worry about it. I've listened to Trump on Howard Stern my whole life. I've actually deduced that I think I've heard Howard Stern's voice more than anybody else in my life, because I started listening to him when I was in high school, on a daily basis. So, I'm 43 years old now. So he's the voice I've heard the most. But when he went in on Trump, he was a Democrat. He had a lot of liberal views. So I thought, okay, he's running on this platform. What he'll do is he'll win on this platform and he'll bring people towards the middle. And clearly, he didn't do that. And there's a couple examples that I point to that, he definitely didn't do that. And I thought he blew some serious opportunities I think he was doomed regardless, but he blew some serious opportunities to bridge some gaps and maybe, put people off of that offensive a little bit. But having said that, it goes back kind of to the point. It's like, how do you run? Like, that's why I will never be a politician, because I'm in that weird space. And I'll give you an example of where I'm going with this. So I've paid for two women. I've been married twice. I've paid for two women to come into this country legally, right? In the legal manner. And I went through the whole process. And after 9/11, the process was a pain in the ass. It used to be a lot easier. Than 9/11 happened, and it changed things. But I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on lawyers and been in meetings. And a lot of those meetings, it looked like I didn't even know my wife, because they interrogate you so much. Sure. I mean, there's a process there. But then again, I'd be the first one to tell you that if I was standing next to a guy and we were having a beer or something, he said, yeah, I came here illegally. I'm from Mexico. My family had nothing. We took a shot. I would literally be like, oh, cheers to that, man. Good job. It's like hard work. So I'm in that weird space where, when my daughters, I have one daughter that believes in stronger borders, and I have another one who takes a very liberal stance on a lot of things. They're 11 and 13, and we don't play identity politics, but I always try to give them both sides of the coin on everything so they understand. So I give them, hey, your father, your stepmom and your mom both had to go through the legal process to get here, and your father is an idiot, and he's the guy who paid for it all. But so when I hear people tell them, like my mother, who is super, super liberal when it comes to immigration, she would just let everybody in. Yeah, I'm like, Nana's never paid for anybody to come here. So it's really easy for her, because Nana doesn't care about paying for that person once they're here, and she's never had to pay for anybody here. But I guarantee you that Nana would have a different opinion on it if she had to cough up thousands of dollars to have her husband here.
Right.
Right. But I don't even have that opinion. I spent the thousands of dollars. I'm the idiot, but I still I understand the reason for strong borders and why you can't just let everybody in. There has to be order, but at the same time, it's not a trigger for me. And just like it wasn't a trigger for my mother when both of my wives were being detained for hours when we travel overseas on their way back.
Sure.
My mother never said a word. She was never outraged. I mean, you know how many flights I've missed, Kenny, with my wife? Because every time we go through, she's not even an American citizen yet, but every time we go through, we have to make sure that we give at least a 4-hour cushion in between layovers, because there have been times where I've sat outside of a room waiting for her and they've kept her in there for 2.5 hours. And she's from Slovakia, dude.
Yeah,
yeah. So, you know,
it's not, is that on the shithole list, or is that the non-shithole? How would Trump describe Slovakia?
Slovakia's got to be the non-shithole list.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's only a few hour plane ride from Slovenia. Yeah. No, but it's that what I'm, you know what I'm saying. They don't discriminate when they fuck with you at customs.
Oh, absolutely not. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. And we still laugh about it, because my wife will come out of that room and I'm like, what did they do? And she's like, half the time I sat there just by myself. You know, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But it's weird. My mother never got angry.
Yeah. Where were you on that one? Yeah, it's that is the nature of it too. Is it's when it's really convenient sometimes to just spill rhetorical devices about how you think things should be, especially when you're not really connected to it. But then on the flip side, the hypocrisy, and this literally goes to both sides. The hypocrisy being that you have no qualms about letting it slide when it's something political on your side, or when it's it's you're going to completely overlook it when it's my side that does it, but you're going to completely make sure to waste no opportunity to point out that it's that guy that I have a problem with, or that side of the political spectrum that I have a problem with when they do it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how we go back to a simpler time when people just disagreed on subjects and still got along, because I remember growing up in such diverse neighborhoods where people had different beliefs and different religions, and even politics. They always said, don't talk about politics. And I always thought that's kind of weird, because I see a lot of people talk about politics, and they would never get really that heated. This is the first time I feel like you could get your ass kicked, for wearing the wrong T-shirt or hat, down the street. And
people have.
Yeah. And it's just, it's a weird time. And I don't know if we could go back. I don't know how we get out of this funk that we're in as a nation, unless the media goes away.
That's what my follow up to this whole thing was going to be because again, like you said, I grew up. You and me both. I guess we would be what they consider the Gen Xers, because we were in our mid late youth, early adulthood before the internet, and we saw the world before the internet and after the internet. And I feel like that world we lived in prior to the internet is a completely different world. Obviously, that's not the most bright statement to make. It's the most.
You're uncovering some
yes,
truth.
Geraldo here opening Al Capone's safe. But how much of this do you think is the fact that technology and the internet and the advent of social media has brought us as a global community so much closer, that everybody and their dog and quite literally have social media profiles and can share their opinion at the drop of a hat? And then coupled to that, the anonymity of the internet allows us to say things we wouldn't otherwise say. So I guess there's two questions in there, but what are your thoughts?
Well, my thought for sure. It's funny you brought that up, because when I was on this pod therapy show that I was on the other day, and they had posed a question to me, they didn't want to put me on the spot, but then they said, how would you solve mass shootings, or what's the cause of mass shooting? So they expected me to answer that one, and I was like, well, I'd be
so glad you asked. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah. But my thought process is, I think the world is so small now.
Yeah.
And I think that's created a problem. I can't put my finger on what that problem is, but I think it's kind of weird that, our grandparents and great grandparents, a vacation was going to the next town, like 30 miles down the road, right? You didn't really get out that much. Now, if we wanted to, we could coordinate to meet in France and get there in less than 24 hours if we really wanted to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very strange when you think about it, how far we've come in a short time. Now you take the internet and you put the internet in there, and you've now made the world really small, because it's not even about travel being convenient, but it's like we could have full-blown friendships and relationships with people on the other side of the world and never have met them personally, in person, right? So I somehow think that plays into what's going on in today's madness with the amounts of shootings, and then also the passing of information so fast. You used to have to wait. I mean, I remember when you used to wait for the newspaper the next day, and then you had to wait again for the next day for more information to come out. And it just like, we were so patient. It's kind of like with phone calls, right? People used to have to call your phone, leave a message on the answering machine. You had to wait for the person to go home, listen to that message, and then call you back if they felt like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, if you don't answer your freaking call, or your text.
Yeah. Oh, God forbid.
Yeah. People freak out.
Absolutely. That's why I had to turn read receipts off.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, because no one appreciates it. Nobody appreciates that you might be in the middle of a meeting. Yeah. You might look at your text to read it real fast, and you're not ignoring that person, but you're just, okay, I'll get to him when I get to him. They'll take offense. So they say, hello, you saw my text. Anyway. Well, that's the worst too, is like when you're at a gun show and you have that lull and you're on your phone all the time. And then people are like, dude, I see you on your phone all the time. I know that you see the message.
Exactly.
Back in the day, I love saying back in the day.
I know, because it literally, we have become those people.
Yeah. I used to strap my leather helmet on and, I used to, Kenny, remember when we used to jump in the old Model T and go about 13 miles an hour? And the one time we almost tipped it over when we went 15.
We swerved to avoid hitting that cow. We didn't have a lot of roads back then.
No, but it is true though. You used to have to have such patience. You used to have the patience with the internet. Remember when dial-up?
Try looking at porn on dial-up, man. You had to have patience and an imagination.
It was almost like a slow striptease.
Yeah. This is the slowest striptease ever. But you're absolutely right. You had to wait. Because you didn't have access to it. If you send an email, odds are to someone who had email, they weren't sitting at a computer that could receive it. And they sure as shit didn't have a device in their pocket that not only could get that message, but then read it to you through your Bluetooth headphones. You'd have to wait for them to get home, turn on their computer, wait for that to boot up, connect to AOL or Prodigy or whatever, check their mail. It was not instant, even though there were things like instant messenger, like the world was not as instant as it is now.
Yeah, and this is my mushroom moment. This is like the type of stuff when I was younger and I'd be on shrooms. And I don't want to rope you into that, Kenny. This is Michael Sodini taking responsibility for his mushroom trips when he was younger. But
tell me about your mind expanding experiences.
I'm gonna have one right now.
See, this kind of stuff works for Joe Rogan. It should work for us. Go ahead.
There you go. But think about this. Instant gratification is what we're kind of moving towards as a society, right? Amazon has figured out a way to deliver same day. Every information is there at our fingertips. If somebody says something, we can just go Google it right away. Maybe that's making us angry. And when we get disappointed, we really get let down. I mean, my kids, they don't have the same enthusiasm that I had on. Remember, it used to be Christmas and your birthday, and that was when you got all your fucking toys for the year.
Yeah.
These days, like my kids, every day is their birthday. As a matter of fact, Christmas, I'm taking away Christmas and their birthday now. I just had a great idea. It's when they absolutely get nothing. Yeah. They don't get to say, Dad, order this from Amazon.
Yeah. Or they get the things that they wouldn't otherwise get. That should be the day they get socks and pajamas and underwear and pens. You know what I mean? School supplies.
But this is where I'm going with this, is that how easy now is it to get disappointed and get disenchanted in life? I mean, that probably speaks to why we need better mental health, because if you don't get that call back right away, or you're not getting that package in the mail fast enough, you know.
Look at social media. That is literally instant gratification. It's about likes, and it's about engagement, and it's about how, you know, people constantly checking, did they like my post? Did they, how many, what quantity? It's become a quantitative game. You know, it's a collection game. It's literally Pokemon Go, but for what you consider your real life. Got to collect all the likes. You know, got to collect all the followers. Got to collect all the subscribers, the views. Right? It's literally that. Yeah, and there are people that live and die by it. That's their brand. That's their business. Is that. So it's fascinating the way that we've shifted. I think you might be right. I think that we're so used to getting all the things we want instantly, or the way we want them, that the minute we're inconvenienced, we don't know how to deal anymore.
Yeah, and we also now have like a support system for our beliefs, strengthening our hate for the people that disagree with us. Because this is my mushroom moment.
No, it's good. You're not wrong. That same technology now allows us to find other like-minded individuals who are also disenfranchised. And now we're on Reddit/r. We've got our own community now where we can just foster that negativity and just let it grow.
Yep. And then you get to see more verbal jabs and battles. Bullying lasts a lot longer than it used to. It used to only last from like 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Now it continues on through social media.
Yeah. And that from 8 to 2, it's still happening on social media and in real life. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was being that I went to 4 different high schools, so I was very privy to like shit talking, and going to 4 different high schools worked both ways. There was negatives to it because there was people that hated you, and then you also got to reinvent yourself, and you were the new guy, so you were the cool shiny toy, right? So you go in there and you're the new guy to the girls. You know, a lot of the guys hate you, whatever. But I always knew that I only had to put up shit from 8 to 2 or 8 to 3, whatever the school hours were. Then I got to either go to football practice or baseball practice or basketball practice. But then I also got to go home, and my home is where I could do anything. I could play video games, I could unwind, I could punch out, I could do homework, Now, Kenny Barlow's picking on Michael Sodini. He could just keep going.
He could just take it. We're going to take this online now that we're going to go home to our separate homes. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Man, I remember like the minute you walked in the minute you walked in the door of your house after school, the world was on the outside of that door.
Right.
You're not wrong. Yeah, exactly. There was a physical separation from it. And I'm not saying that I want any of this technology to go away. I think it's great, and I think it's helpful, and I'm not advocating anything. It's more just trying to identify issues. But I think that it's gonna have to put a lot. It's gonna require a lot more maybe it's gonna require a lot more involvement from parents, and it's gonna require a lot more responsibility for ourselves and on our peer groups to I don't know, figure out responsible ways to be raised around these things. It keeps reminding me. I keep thinking about Jurassic Park. I keep thinking about Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. One of my favorite parts of that movie is when they're sitting around the table talking about the ethical ramifications for making these dinosaurs, like making dinosaurs, right? And he has that line, and you can kind of apply this to anything, but he's like, your engineers were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they never stopped to think whether they should. Right. And I think that is I think that's that can be a very nuanced take if you apply that to what's going on right now with some of these technologies. It's good. I think we should be going in those directions, but I should also think that innovation. I want innovation. I want us to push the envelope. I want to see where we can go as a society and as a humanity. But I also think that it's kind of like when we talk about being a responsible gun owner, is that I want people to own these things, but I also want them to own the responsibility of owning the firearm. And so if you're going to create these technologies, I want people to be responsible enough to go, as we're going in this direction, let's be cognizant about the moral implications of misuse and the moral implications of how this can be used. Just, I don't know if that even makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And it kind of just brings me back to community. And I think that's why it's important that we don't get away from community as technology grows and as the world becomes smaller. That's why I kind of have no problem with, I've never been bothered by a group that labels themselves and it's their little community, even though, like, I'll give you an example. Like, if you take the liberal gun owners, like, that's a group within the 2A community. And then you have armed equality, right, which is the LGBTQ. And there are a lot of people who will say, well, why do they have to label themselves that? We're all just gun owners. But I think it's important to label yourself like that, just as I feel like if you have to identify, like, I have friends that identify with Black Lives Matter, and I get that. I get that they need to look around and say, okay, we know exactly what we're talking about, right? Because I don't know what it's like to be gay, right? So I get falsely accused of that all the time. No, but
I can see how they misconstrue this.
No, but it's true, right? Like, so I've never been labeled as that to also apply it to firearms. So I think that if I were a gay man, I would love to be part of armed equality.
Yeah.
And that gives me back to my sense of community. That also gives me a chance to have my own community call me out if I'm being ridiculous about something, right? So leading it back to mental health, which I do all the time now these days, like everything is, my kids are going to go nuts from this because they're like, not everything has to be a lesson about mental health. No, I'm serious. Like I have all these teachable moments now, because before it used to be like, yeah, your dad used to party at this club in New York City. Look how cool he was. Now it's like, come here, girls. I wanted to show you this video.
Yeah, Dad's wearing a cardigan again.
That's right.
Oh, no.
But that's I think community is going to be important, and I think addressing mental health is going to be important, because we're going to have to start talking to people that have been bullied from 8 to 11, 12 o'clock at night, and start understanding that that's out there. And people want to identify with something. And the less that we're pushing kids out there to talk to each other and they're able to do it online, the more disappointed they're going to be at workspaces when you have to get along with someone you don't have to. You shouldn't have to, or you have to because it's a work environment.
Yeah.
I tell my daughters all the time, I don't care if you hate your teacher. I need you to be able to push through that. We can't just bail you out of a situation you don't want to, because when you have a job and the coworker that you can't stand is 2 cubicles over, it's not that easy to go just find another job. You might have to work with somebody or work for somebody that you disagree with, but you got to find common ground to agree with them on whatever it is, getting the fucking job done. Yeah,
exactly. Because there is a team, wherever you, whether it's at school, a school project, as team sports, or at work, you're going to have to work with some people who you disagree with or you don't like. And you're going to have to put that shit aside and get the job done. To your point, it was interesting to your point about the labeling and the kind of creating kind of homogenous groups inside of, say, the 2A. I agree with you. And I'll tell you, I had a conversation with Maj about this. He's the one that actually was able to bend that around my brain in a way that I could understand it. So it was when we were at NRA in Dallas, and that night we were all hanging out with Pincus and all that, and he's like, bottom line is, my community is not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
He's like, he's like, you can stand up there and be 100% right. And you are. He's like, but they're not going to listen because of what you look like. And he's like, it sucks, but the world is imperfect. And that's how it is. He's like, so I can go into my community and I can give them that exact same facts, and it brings us together. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. Sometimes, it in the LGBTQ community, it's going to take people like Piper to form a community and speak those same facts. We may be armed with them, but the people of her community are going to respond to that more so than they would from me. I am completely fine with that, because the funny thing is that that's just markets. And that's kind of how he tied it all together for me too, knowing my libertarian ANCAP philosophy. Is he's like, that's the economics of the situation. That's literally capitalism. We believe that capitalism does create unequals. He's like, we're fine with it. So just understand that there are communities, and it is what it is. Like these are market signals. People like me go, oh, there is a market for this. That's the signal. So I'm going to go into my community and preach the good word of 2A. Piper's doing the exact same thing. There's a demand in a market, and they're filling it because I can't fill it. You can't fill it.
Yep. That's why I'm working with a couple different people on Walk the Talk America's goal. And I've said this before to you, if as the 2A community says to the rest of the world, oh, gun deaths are mostly suicide and then gangbangers or people committing homicides in underprivileged, underserved communities. That's what Walk the Talks America is about. Is let's solve that then. Let's get rid of those numbers or bring those numbers down. And I think that's how the 2A community becomes like the alcohol industry, by getting out in front of things and getting legislation off of our back, because they're like, oh, they do care and they are doing something about it. So let's take all of the money that we made in the Obama years and start to shift towards, doing something about stuff. I think that's worked against us for a long time because they don't see the effort. But it was funny because I made some promises when I started this organization that I definitely would help out certain communities, because it's important, because in some communities you just don't talk about mental health, period, right?
Yeah.
And I was and for me, I had to go find people that had that cred, because this isn't fucking The Blind Side. White Mike is not the hero. White Mike's not going in. I saw The Blind Side. I said, what kind of fucking bullshit is this movie? That lady would be shot and pimped out. Walk up into a Crip hood or whatever and just tell them how it is with your fucking Texas accent. I was like, this is such bullshit.
That movie literally should be called White Privilege. Like that's... Yeah. Like, in fact, that's what I'm going to use from now on, because, we've had this conversation too. We understand when people say, like, the people get offended by the concept of white privilege on the right. It's like, okay, you don't get it, but objectively you have to look at certain things that allow us to do certain things. I'm going to use The Blind Side as a perfect example. Like, listen, you want to know what I mean when I say white privilege? And they go, what? I was like, did you ever see The Blind Side? No, and all 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. Be like, that whole movie. Yes. Whole movie.
Dangerous Minds. Yeah. I love all these like white hero movies where it's like they go right into the bad spot and everybody just falls in line and listens and they save. It's like, no, motherfucker, that doesn't happen. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I could, and it's just like Maj was saying. It could be the same exact message, but it just seems a little strange when you can't identify with the person that's telling you that,
right?
And there is a little bit of unfairness in the world, right? Like no one knows my backstory, no one knows where I grew up, no one knows that, and there are all kinds of people that grow up in certain aspects of poverty that could be worse than the kid in Compton, but the optics do not look good when Mike Sodini is saying, listen up, Compton. I know what it's like. It just doesn't play well. And I think you need to have your leaders and you need to have your leaders that have labels so people can identify. It's like, if I came from, let's say, Oakland or Compton or any of these places that have that notoriety, I would want to talk to Maj over Mike.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
he looks relatable to me.
Exactly.
You know?
It's it's completely it. But to your point, the joke I was going to make is that basically if you feel that before talking to a group you have to say, ladies and gentlemen of this group, I'm just like you, here's a backstory of why, you're the wrong spokesman for that group. You know, it sounds counterintuitive to the great goal of everybody kumbayaing and getting along. But you know, the funny thing is it like, why even strive for that utopia? I think the utopia comes in people like us saying, I understand that is different. The utopia comes from us understanding that nuance that, listen, Maj is a better spokesperson for that community than I am. And being okay with that. Like that in and of itself, that realization, and being okay with it is probably the first step into that utopia, is celebrating the fact that we are different, you know?
Well, and also too, it's if you're results driven, I don't give a fuck who gives the speech.
Mm-hmm.
Get it done, right? Like, I don't want the credit. I don't need this. I don't need that. If Maj can walk into a certain demographic and get results faster than I can, because I don't have to go through the fucking Eminem like freestyle battle, prove yourself in a world where you don't belong.
Yep.
If I really want to save lives, I want to send in somebody that could spread the message a lot faster than I can. I'll get there, right?
Sure.
Just by being around Maj and being able to come in and have dialogue. But, you know, that's to me, it's about let's save lives, let's get results, let's do something.
Exactly.
So I think it plays into everything you're saying.
Yeah, I like that. If you're results oriented, then it does require your acceptance of that premise that there are certain communities that aren't going to listen to you from the get-go, so you got to pick the right spokesman to get your message across. So you're going to want that higher signal to noise ratio for the group you're talking to.
Sometimes I do find myself sounding like Trump when I talk about like things I love, like Walk the Talk America. It's really funny. I'm like, what we're doing is huge. It's amazing. You're going to love this. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, oh, it's very Trump-esque.
we're working on mental health. It's going to be huge.
Dude,
it's got
everything we've done.
All the mentals will be healthed, and there won't be people who can't get mental health.
We're putting the card in the box. It's great. Everybody loves it.
They love what I'm doing. You should see the polls. You know, mental health is up in a lot of polls. He loves fucking polls, man. That guy loves polls.
In New York, like when he would go on Stern, he was a funny guy, and you know, now he's just become a complete asshole. And you're just like, why do you give him that power, guys? Like, he knows exactly what he's doing when he releases a tweet.
And then the funny thing is that, you know, you sit there and you watch these speeches and you're like, your eyes are about to roll out of your head because they're rolling so hard. But then he will actually genuinely say something funny. And then you find yourself laughing because it's like, oh my God, at his heart, he is an entertainer and he's an entertaining guy. I hate that. I found that funny. But like when he goes off the cuff and makes and just he'll make a joke or two, and you're like, oh my God, that's funny. You know, and then you feel bad. Like, why am I laughing at that?
There are times when he comes off as a straight New Yorker. Like, you could tell, like he knows he's joking, or he knows he's going to piss somebody off, and he's ball busting. But so like I always go through all these presidents, like you know, Obama. He struck me as a guy like who's my buddy down the street that we were friends at playing basketball, and we do all these like things, and he's safe because he's so likable. Like, yeah, Brock's coming over, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, Brock and I, we just got done playing ball. Brock and I are gonna go to the movies later. Like, Clinton came off like a guy that I just wanted to chase women with. Like Clinton, he was personable. Like, he was clearly into ladies,
as history shows.
Yeah, as history showed. And it was kind of like, you know, that friend. And then Bush, who I never knew. I mean, after Bush got out of being president, I wanted to hang out with him. I was like, I hated him back then, you know, and a lot of that probably was my ignorance in politics. because a lot of people that I know, like my mother, they were like, "Oh, say goodbye to abortion," if he gets elected, and that didn't happen. But yeah,
which is hilarious because it's like, if Bush didn't get rid of abortion, you think this guy is going to be anti-abortion?
No, it's funny, but who knew Bush was so funny?
Yeah, and yeah, he always seemed like a down home, hardworking guy. If someone was like, "Who's the president that you think you could have a beer with?" It's like, yeah, well, obviously it's Bush.
Yeah.
Although he seems like a whiskey kind of guy to me, which is fine too.
Well, I knew there was a bigger game at hand when him and Clinton hit the road for their little 2-team comedy tour that they did. Like I was like, they're buddies. And I was like, oh shit. That was my aha moment where I'm like, dude, we're not invited to that party. Whatever it is that they're doing there, this is I hate to always say like shit like the Illuminati, but it's a special group that we're not invited to.
It is. That's a good way to say it. It's upper echelon of people that we will never belong to.
Yeah. Yeah. You run in different circles, and it'll be interesting. This may be the first president that gets kicked out of the good old boy club. You know what I mean? Because you see the banter between Bush and Obama. You see the banter between all the other ones. You know what I mean? Jimmy Carter became somewhat of a hero to the people after he was president. Yeah, it'll be interesting if Trump could slide his way into.
Yeah, and I read an article just recently about this sort of beautiful friendship that developed between Michelle Obama and Laura Bush after, and their work together on a bunch of initiatives too. So it's like, I think that you're right. Next election, that whoever gets elected, whenever the changing of the guard happens, that relationship has been severed. It's that no more of these thoughtful notes for the next guy thing, like the way Bush did for Obama and Obama did for Trump. I think that's gone after this.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the only person who is going to be in complete like euphoria and happiness is Melania, because that motherfucker's like, I did not sign up for this.
Of course.
Yeah, I think about this all the time. My wife's Slovakian, and I can only imagine like if one day she's like, honey, you're first dude of fucking Slovakia. Like, you're now king or whatever. Like, I would be like, no.
What a tireless position to be put in is that you're constantly being judged solely on the person that you married. Like, it's... Yep. Like, this is congratulations for the next 4 to 8 years. You're judged by that person. Your value as a human is not based on what you do individually. It's by what this person does. And it's fodder for CNN and The Daily Show and all that other stuff.
I know. You got to wonder if she was like thinking as it was getting more of a reality, like, all right, when is this? Because I truly don't believe it.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and I think it was just like, it almost kind of reminds you of Office Space, right? Like when he's trying to get himself fired, but he just keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher. And, it's like, holy shit, he's got a shot at this. I don't know if I would have been able to like stay in the pocket if I was her.
I doubt it. That was definitely not his election to win. That was Hillary Clinton's to lose, because dude comes out and says 3 things a week that would tank a normal politician's career and ends up getting elected.
We're on our way to idiocracy, but so listen, I think like I've held you here long enough. I think a recap is in order. I think we
solved all of the world's problems. I think so. Or at least we solved the question of, are we the coolest guys in the gun industry? And we solved the ranking of who is the coolest not gun guy and who comes in number 2. And I'll take that.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that if anything, we have made it so people might want to have a drink with us or throw a drink on us.
Either way, absolutely.
Either way.
I think I'm fine with that too.
Listen, brother, I love you.
I love you too, brother.
I thank you for coming on. Kenny, how do people follow you on social media?
They can find me at Kenny Barlow on Instagram. And I think I'm at Kenny Barlow on Twitter too. So they can find me there. If there's anybody needing OEM gun parts or gun whatevers or stuff for your gun industry stuff, you can check me at dasanusa.com, DASAN USA.com, and then reach out to me there.
All right, Kenny. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So maybe you hang up.
You hang up.
No, you hang up.
No, you hang up.
No, seriously, Kenny, just hang up.
No, you hang up. You do it. Push the button.
I'll stay here all night if you don't hang up.
Well, I'm not incentivized to hang up then.
All right, perfect.
All right, man. I will talk to you later.
All right, later.
All right, see ya.